All right, we've hit the top of the hour and we have a lot to talk about this week, as you can imagine. So we will go ahead and get started. So thank you everyone for being here for the August 2022 round of the Kentucky Monthly Climate Perspective on Drought and Hydrologic Conditions. This month, we will have Chip Zimmer from the Kentucky Division of Water doing the main presentation. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and pass it over to him. And just a gentle reminder to keep yourself muted. And if you have any questions, go ahead and type them into the chat box. So here we go.
Thanks, Megan. And just first, a heads up, I apologize in advance if you're barking. The garbage man is going through the neighborhood and my dogs think that he is out to get us, apparently. So there may be some barking in the background, though I've got myself a closed door in between us. So anyways, let's get started here. First off, just a reminder, this webinar is presented by the Kentucky Climate Center at Western Kentucky University in partnership with the National Integrated Drought Information System and Drought Early Warning System. And this production really reflects the contributions of a lot of different partners throughout the state and is committed to serving the needs of the people of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Our next webinar is scheduled for September 1st. I believe it's Matt's turn is up next. I don't know. I messed up the schedule, the weekly or the monthly schedule by being off last month. So it's all kind of up in the air right now. And this webinar is being recorded and will be available on the Kentucky Climate Center's YouTube channel. So, and that picture was from Todd County in the background showing some rain shafts falling from earlier this month, something that a lot of us have seen lately. Just a quick summary or outline of what we're going to be talking about. We're going to start with recent conditions, move on to impacts, and then look ahead at the outlook. And on the left, you see kind of the tale of two weather situations going on. The top picture is Fulton County out in Western Kentucky, where we are in drought. You can see the dry ground and the poor little soybean plant struggling to grow. And is from the one of Robinson Forest mesonet stations in Breathitt County. And those storm clouds you see moving in are the beginning of the big flooding rain event that we saw July 27th and 28th. So start looking at the 7-day precipitation amounts, and you can see that over the past week there's been quite a bit of rain, not just in southeast Kentucky, but pretty much the entire state. Out in eastern Kentucky, you can see totals 5, 6, 7 inches of rain. The one station in Breathitt County at Quicksand 0.00, and that's because that gauge now belongs to the North Fork of the Kentucky River, so it's incomplete data. And then also, we had the biggest flooding rains out in southeast Kentucky, but you can see still a lot of rain out across Lake Cumberland area over into the upper Green River area. Some 2, 3, 4 inch rainfall totals. Really every place but far western Kentucky and up a little bit in northern Kentucky really got a lot of rain in the past week. And as I was looking at the radar just a minute ago, it looks like a lot of people are getting more rain right now. If we expand this out to the past 30 days, again, you can see a lot of rain across southeast Kentucky, over a foot, even 14 inches have fallen in the past 30 days. But again, across Lake Cumberland area, down in McCreary County, Monroe County, Cumberland County, 10, 11 inches of rain, and up the lower green places getting 9, 10 inches of rain. So, over a 30-day period, you're talking 2-3 months worth of rain right there. And then you go out to Western Kentucky and you see Graves County, 1.9 inches of rain, Callaway County, 2.72 inches of rain. It's kind of been a case of the haves and have-nots. So it's kind of been a rough time out in Western Kentucky with the drought, and then a rough time in Eastern Kentucky with all the rain. If we expand that out to 60 days, again, you can see all the rain that's fallen. And again, a lot of that fell during the 30-day period. So, but totals only go up to 16, 17 inches of rain that were 11, 12 inches of rain over the 30-day period. So a lot of that fell during the initial 30-day period of this. But again, you got to Grace County, 3.74 inches of rain. So it's been a long time since they've seen a substantial amount of rain. And you expand out to the 90-day, again, it just kind of paints that same picture. Again, before we got into this wet period over the past 30 days, we were talking about drought. If you remember last month, that was all we were focused on, was on the developing drought. And, it's been a big change over the past 30 days since we last talked, with the exception of out in Western Kentucky. Even in the past 90 days, you look and see only 7, 8 inches of rain over the past 3 months. So just looking at this as percent of normal, you can see over the 30-day period, places, not just Southeast Kentucky, but Lake Cumberland area, lower Green River area, looking at 400% of normal. That's just phenomenal. And if you go look at the 30 and 60, or the 60 and 90 day, again, just most of the state has been getting some pretty good rains, or it's above normal, I should say, for the 60 and 90 day period, except Western Kentucky. There are a few places are slightly below normal, but they're kind of the exception to the rule. So we've really recovered over the past 30 days from where we were last month. And a lot of that was, how much rain we've gotten. If you look, Kentucky has averaged roughly 8.81 inches of rainfall in July, which is 4.4 inches above normal. And it was the second wettest July on record. And if you look at just the Eastern Climatic Division, they averaged over 12 and a half inches of rain in July. And not only does that make it the wettest July on record, it broke the record by 2.75 inches. So just phenomenal. And these are numbers going to the 1895. So, phenomenal amounts of rain that we've seen. Looking at temperatures, it's also been pretty warm for most of the state. The state averaged 2 degrees above normal for July, but it wasn't quite evenly distributed. Eastern Kentucky was a lot closer to normal than Western Kentucky. If you look on the right, days above 90 degrees, places out in Eastern Kentucky, only a handful of days above 90 degrees. You get towards Louisville, Bowling Green, you're talking half or more of the days above 90 degrees. And you get out to Western Kentucky, places like Callaway County, 25 out of 31 days were above 90 degrees. And if you go look at days above 95 degrees, again, hardly any days in Eastern Kentucky or even Lexington above 95 degrees. But out Callaway County, over half the days in July were above 95 degrees. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the ground out there is very dry. While other places were getting rain, that really helps keep temperatures down. Plants are green, they're absorbing sunlight and energy. The ground is wet. It takes a lot more energy to heat up water. And also you have evaporation going on, which also helps cool the air. At Western Kentucky, the bone dry ground, all that ground is just absorbing heat and radiating it back out. So it makes a big difference. I know there was a day a couple weeks ago, I looked at the Mesonet and it was low 90s, upper 80s across the entire state until you got out to the Trigg County, Graves County, and you had temperatures at or above 100 degrees. It was quite a jump in temperatures. So it just shows how much dry dry ground can play into raising temperatures up. So looking at the drought monitor, it looks a lot different than it was last month. If you look, we got a lot of drought over in the Texas, Midwest, and then also out west where they've been in drought for several years now. Not a lot of drought over on the East Coast in the Carolinas and Georgia anymore. Been a lot of changes there and also in Kentucky. Just looking at the state itself, you can see most of the drought across the state has been erased except for the extreme western part of the state. We still have some severe and even a tiny bit of extreme drought out in the purchase area, but for the rest of the state, we are drought free. And looking at the 4-week change map, you can see just how much improvement there has been across the state and across, like I said, the whole Southeast, the Carolinas, Georgia. There's been a lot of improvement. And then just to the west in the Midwest there, been a lot of degradation. And that's included the Western Kentucky area. And basically that big dome of heat and dry air over us has shifted just to the west, bringing a lot of relief to most of the state. Looking at soil moisture, no surprise, there is a surplus of soil moisture in a lot of the state, the exception being far western Kentucky. There is dry soils in that area. The current topsoil moisture, you can see from last week, we were ranging about 55% that was short or very short. And fast forward to now, only under 20%. And I'd expect that number to continue to go down as we get more rain. So been quite a change in the past week and in the past month. Looking at Mesonet soil moisture, Grays and Fulton County right next to each other. You can see Grays County talking about, they've been dry. They really haven't gotten any other rain recently. And you can see soil moisture levels there are low and continuing to drop in the 20 and 40 inch depth. Just one county over in Fulton County, they have gotten some rain during July and of late. And you can see not only you can see that rain in the shallower depth, but also the 20-inch soil moisture. You can see that has improved since the beginning of July. So they're in a lot better shape in Fulton County. So hopefully places like Grays County can get in on some rain this week as well and start to get out of this drought. 7-day average stream flows, again, no surprise, lots of black and blue out in eastern and central Kentucky, showing just the highest stream flows that we're seeing out there and have seen over the past week. Even in western Kentucky, they're seeing normal stream flows. So no place in the state has below normal stream flows. And looking at the 28-day average, seeing the same thing. So a lot of those low stream flows that we're seeing a month ago are a thing of the past now. So, and hopefully it stays that way, but hopefully not to the extent that we're seeing and have seen over the past week in eastern Kentucky. There is too much, can be too much of a good thing. Looking at storm reports for the past 30 days, again, lots of flood reports from southeast Kentucky. Also a lot of wind damage reports across the state. I know that line running from Louisville through Lexington, I know that storm, I guess about 3 weeks ago, I know it did some damage to even some buildings in downtown Georgetown along with trees. So just a lot of thunderstorms with all the rain and creating some thunderstorm winds pretty much everywhere in the state over the past month. And of course, the big impact of the past month has been eastern Kentucky. Just unbelievable amounts of rain last week. You can see all this is from the National Weather Service in Jackson. And you can see from July 25th to July 30th, you can see on that preset map, greater than 10 inches. And it's not just a little isolated area, just a huge bullseye, which has really made this unprecedented because it's not just dealing with a flash flood in a single holler or watershed. It's just been large section, multiple counties. So it's been making it very difficult for crews to get in and find people and help people and begin the cleanup. And looking at the bottom, you can see the setup that kind of led to this. We had a strong low level jet, which was just pumping in lots of moisture into this front that was just kind of stalled out over the area. And with that strong upper level winds that we also had, it was pushing the storms along that axis. So instead of the normal summer pattern where the storms fire up and they really don't move too fast and they eventually rain themselves out as that cool rain, that cool air that they produce kind of kills them. This was allowing storms to fire up and move, and the next storm to fire up in the exact same spot and move, causing a training effect and just leading to storms running over the same area over and over again. And according to the Weather Service, this was a 1 in 1,000 chance to have this much rainfall over a period of 4 days in July. So you hear about the 1 in 1,000 year storm. Well, and I don't, it's not the greatest term to use because it's not something that's going to happen once every 1,000 years necessarily. It's a statistical thing, and it basically saying that there is a 0.1% chance of that happening. So next year, there will still be a 0.1% chance of it happening again. It's just, odds are, if you look at statistics, it should only happen once every 1,000 years. And also with it being such a widespread event, we didn't just see flash flooding on the little streams and stuff like we normally see. We saw flash flooding on the major rivers in Eastern Kentucky, which is something you don't see very often. You don't see levels on the Kentucky River or the forks of the Kentucky River jump that much that fast. If you look at the bottom first, that is the USGS gauge at Jackson. It crested at 43.47 feet, which was just above the record of 43.1 feet. So it was a record crest in Jackson. Up on top is Whitesburg, the North Fork River at Whitesburg. The old record was 14.7 feet. I believe that was set back in the 1950s. The gauge reached 20.91 feet, which is over 6 feet above the old record. And it stopped recording at that point because the gauge was wiped out by the floodwaters. USGS did send a crew down right after that, had somebody on the ground. They measured the stream, or they measured the river at 22 feet. It was already dropping at that point. So what they'll likely do is, I know what they've done in the past in situations like this, is they will survey the area and look for watermarks and then calculate how high that crest actually got. So it may take some time for them to put all it together, but eventually they'll publish a stage of what the river actually met. So, but it looks like it's going to be at least 22 feet high, which would be even, was that 8 feet, 7 feet, 8 feet over the previous record. Again, just phenomenal to see a record broken by that much, especially, and this isn't a gauge that's only been around for 10 years or something like that. This is a gauge that's been around for an extended period of time, back, like I said, 50, I think it goes back to even the 40s or 30s. So, I mean, it's almost 100 years worth of records, and to see a record crest broke by that much is just phenomenal. And on the right there is just all the different flash flood warnings that were issued by National Weather Service in Jackson over a 4-day period. So just over and over again issuing flash flood warnings. For the year so far in terms of thunderstorm and tornado warnings for the state, 2022 is just about average, or maybe slightly higher than average for since 2000, but well above where we were last year. In fact, we've already surpassed 2021 for the total number of severe weather warnings that they had for the entire year. So even if we don't have one the rest of the year, we're still going to have more than we did in 2021. But still nowhere close to matching what we saw back in 2011 and 2012. So talk about ag impacts. So we're talking about flooding now. We're going to be talking more about the damage that's been done from the past month in the drought. Corn has taken the biggest hit. You can see right now, only about 35% of corn is rated as good or excellent. Pasture and soybeans are a little better, but they're still under 50% that are good or excellent, but they have come up over the past week or 2 weeks with the rain. That you see down the bottom left, corn has really just kind of plateaued. So it hasn't gotten any better, but at least right now it's not getting any worse. On the bottom right is a tweet and pictures from Chad Lee showing the difference between non-irrigated corn and irrigated corn. The irrigated corn, you can see most of the kernels were pollinated and have started to fill out. On the right, you can see the non-irrigated corn and just you see a lot of kernels just didn't get pollinated, and there's no, once that happens, there's no coming back from that. Timing is very critical, and if it's hot, if it's dry, if the plant's stressed, it's not going to pollinate as well. And once that happens, there's no pollination afterwards. So not only was this drought hit, causing problems with the crops, but it hit the exact wrong time for corn. So for most part, the rain was just too little too late. And there are places where, if you plant the corn late or early, depending on where you were, that they had already pollinated before it got hot and dry, or they pollinated once the rains hit. And the further west you go, the worse it was. So places closer to Lexington, Bowling Green may have fared a little better because they did get on the rains a little earlier than they did. Like I said, Grace County, that area still has yet to get in the rains. So now beans and pastures are a little more resilient. Beans don't have that critical period like corn does, so they can kind of chill. And as long as it doesn't get so dry that the plants themselves die, they can just kind of hang on. And once the rains come, then they can pollinate and the pods can grow and fill. And same thing with pastures. Pastures will just kind of go dormant. And as long as it doesn't get super dry and the corn or the grass itself dies, it will come back once we get some rain. Now with pastures, it's important to have a recovery period and let that grass kind of come out of dormancy and start growing again. So that's something that producers are going to have to kind of work on, and maybe sacrificing one field and let the animals graze in that field while the other ones recover. The other issue now is, we went from drought to flooding, and flooding can also cause problems, and is causing problems. And like I said, we had the focus on Eastern Kentucky as it should be, but we've had flash flooding in other areas of the state and areas that do have more agriculture. There is some corn grown in Southeast Kentucky, but not very much compared to places further west. But we did have flash flooding up in the lower Green River area where there is a lot of corn. And corn doesn't do good when it's flooded. If the soil is submerged more than 24 hours, the plant will not survive. And if you get high enough water and you get mud on the corn and on the ears of corn, it also will not be salvageable. So there's a link there if you want to learn more about flood damage in corn and what producers need to look for if they did have experienced flooding in their fields. All right, now looking ahead, the 7-day forecast. It's going to rain. Unfortunately, for Eastern Kentucky, we're going to rain. Hopefully this will be focused, according to the 7-day precipitation forecast that looks to be focused more on central Kentucky, which while we've been wet, we haven't been as wet as eastern Kentucky. So I'd rather see that over western Kentucky where it is drier. But I know we have storms firing up. In fact, I can hear thunder outside right now here in Georgetown. But it looks like we are going to be stuck in this pattern for at least a week. And in fact, the 6 to 10 day outlook has above normal precipitation over the state there too. So it looks like we might be stuck in this pattern, according to this forecast, for at least a week, if not a week and a half. The good thing is the outlook for temperatures over the next 6 to 10 days is near normal. So, which isn't surprising if it's raining a lot. That will keep the temperatures down. The 8 to 14 day outlooks does show us start drying out, especially in the western part of the state. And also something we haven't seen much of lately, below normal temperatures. Excuse me. We can definitely use, especially in places where we don't have power or people are cleaning up, for it not to be maybe not so hot like it is today and it was yesterday. The monthly outlook for August is still showing above normal precipitation for the eastern half of the state. A lot of the drier area across the Midwest and up in New England, and that does include right there on the edge of western Kentucky, but above normal temperatures for the month, which seems to be the common theme. The exception being out in the Four Corners region, where they are having the monsoonal rains, which they've had quite a bit this year. And looking ahead to the seasonal outlook, August through October, no clear signal for precipitation for us. So could be wet, could be dry, could be normal, but above normal temperatures for pretty much the entire country. El Nino, it looks like we are going to stick with El Nino through the fall. Excuse me. But as we move into winter, it looks like the forecast is starting to point towards more neutral forecasts instead of La Nina. So we may finally, after 3 years of La Nina, finally get out of that pattern. But we have to wait till January, February to get out of it. So, and obviously that forecast could change as we move into the fall. The stream flow outlook for August, no surprise, the outlook is for above normal stream flows for most of the state. Looking at the drought monitor or the drought forecast, showing for western Kentucky either drought is removed or drought remains but improves. So going with the forecast for the next couple weeks with all the rainfall, that's where that's focusing on. So hopefully they do get some rain over the next few days in that area. Significant fire hazard outlook. Nothing in Kentucky. Again, not surprising. So the fire situation is going to be much more significant out in the plains and out on the West Coast. So in summary, July was very wet and also warm, especially in the western half of the state. And we saw the unprecedented rainfall that brought flash flooding to southeastern Kentucky. Ag-wise, the biggest concern we have right now is with corn. We won't know probably for another month or more how much the yields are going to drop, but it's something that we'll be looking out for. Luckily, soybeans and pastures should rebound. I don't think we're going to have record soybean yields this year, but they should recover and we still can have decent yields for soybeans. We still do have drought in the western part of the state, even severe to even extreme drought west of the land between the lakes. And our outlooks are showing that we still have more chances for precipitation for at least the next week before finally maybe getting a break from all the rain. So that is all I have. And remember, the next scheduled webinar is September 1st, and below are the links for the drought impact reporter, which again, even though we are getting out of the drought, hopefully it's still important to get those reports in. So you can go to that link, or you can scan the QRL code right there, and that'll take you to the form. And go ahead and open it up if anybody has any questions. And Megan also posted that link to the flood damage in corn on the chat as well. So sit tight for a couple minutes, and you can type in your question, or you can unmute yourself and ask a question.
So guys, this is Matt. Excuse me. Good presentation, Chip. I just wanted to add, he put it in his last slide there. You know, this definitely was an unprecedented event that Eastern Kentucky saw last week. I was talking to a county agent earlier, and our mind tends to always go to what has happened recently. And Kentucky as a whole has no doubt been impacted by multiple natural disasters. Whenever you take into account this flood, we take into account the Western Kentucky tornado. But something she reminded me about this morning was the fact that, you know, we go back to February of 2021. That was a really harsh winter for Kentucky, especially Eastern Kentucky. There was, I believe, 3 ice storms that progressed through the eastern portion of the state, and that was followed by exceptional rainfall to end February. And I'm actually getting ready to do a presentation next week about it, but I have the 72-hour rainfall totals from the Mesnet right here in front of me. And generally that same area, in addition to portions of South Central Kentucky, saw 5, 6, 7+ inches over that 3-day time span. Now, of course, a lot of the rain fell in a much shorter time span with this latest round we had, but there were a lot of houses lost back in 2021 too. A lot of flooding. You probably remember Beattyville was completely flooded. There were other towns lost. But she reminded me, look, Matt, there were some people that lost their houses then and were just now getting rebuilt. And then this happened again. So again, thoughts and prayers out to those folks in Eastern Kentucky. Some of them have dealt with this twice in the past year and a half. So if you're a county extension agent, we are having a disaster preparedness Zoom talk next Wednesday between 1 and 2:30. I think you can sign up on KERS, but once again, our mind always tends to go to what has happened recently, but some of those folks, so they've had to deal with this twice in less than a year and a half. So.
Yeah, that's one thing that has come up a lot with the media inquiries I've gotten lately, because everybody is so focused on what's happening now, and then, you know, having to step back and say, wait a second, this has actually been happening over and over and over again. And, you know, we just, as you're saying, you know, we remember that most recent and impactful time, and trying to put it in perspective, I guess. And I saw Keenan and Kevin unmute, so I don't know if they have something they want to jump in on.
Yeah, this is.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, this is Keenan. Two questions. One on that Zoom talk next Wednesday. Will that be recorded? Because the second Wednesday of the month, extension agents, that's sacred to administration, and we have to go sit in on a area staff update thing.
I'll check on that, but it should be recorded. So actually, I'll make sure it's recorded.
Okay, we would appreciate that. And my other question was, I was searching online and my skills aren't the greatest, but I was trying to find a map that showed and maybe one doesn't exist, but the areas in eastern Kentucky that were flooded and to what extent. Is there just something like that out there? The reason was last December after the tornado, our cattlemen wanted to find a location that maybe a smaller area that was impacted that wasn't getting the immediate attention and the relief that they needed. And through extension agents, we were able to locate two. But I was trying to do the same thing for the cattlemen's relief efforts. But I couldn't find a map that showed. I found counties that were listed in FEMA and stuff like that, but not a map that showed the areas of flooding and maybe the extent.
So Chip and Megan, you correct me if I'm wrong, but Jackson would probably have the best available information, correct? NWS Jackson.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
And they have a pretty good, well, Matt, you shared that with me, and they have a pretty good description of the flooding and stuff on their website.
NWF Jackson.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I think as far as maps showing everything, I think it's, pick any one of those counties and pick any point in it. I mean, any low-lying area in those counties got hit. I mean, it was such a widespread event.
Wow.
Yeah, in that sense, it was a bit different than some of the recent years where that has been a more localized flooding. So it's really only affected one county or maybe a couple counties. This was a much larger area. And I just threw the Jackson Weather Service event summary in the chat. So if you want a direct link, there you go.
Great, thank you.
Yes, this is Kevin. I have one question. Are there any mesonet sites that are still down in eastern Kentucky, and did they get the ones repaired in western Kentucky that went through the tornado? Are all the sites back up and running now, or are there still some down?
So we got the Caldwell County station in western Kentucky that was destroyed by the tornado. We got that fully back up and running a week or two ago. So that is all good now. With regard to eastern Kentucky, unfortunately, our Breathitt County station and Quicksand flooded. Unfortunately, that has not been repaired yet. We don't have the parts to go repair enough for it to be worth a visit out there right now. So we'll probably do a surveillance run just to check on it within the next week or so. But for right now, we wanted to kind of stay out of the area and not cause more trouble by being out that way. So hopefully we'll get it back up soon. But for right now, we have the other two that are at Robinson Forest in Breathitt County that are kind of acting as supplementary.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Megan, can I add one more bullet point?
Yeah, how about it?
Yeah, so something to think about, and we'll talk about this next Wednesday in that preparedness meeting, but we are in a wetter and warmer climate based on those latest set of climate normals that came out last year. And in doing so, yes, we can still have drought, but drought seems to be shorter lived. We saw that back in 2019. We saw that back in 2016. But along with that, we've also seen these devastating floods in other locations too, right? Not just eastern Kentucky. St. Louis, they got that rain, the day before. We look back last year, I mentioned eastern Kentucky, the start of March into February, but also we look over on, I believe it was the west side of Nashville last year, saw unprecedented flooding. It was something like 17 inches of rain in 24 hours. So it seems like to me, and Megan, Chip, you guys can chime in too, but we're seeing more and more of these extreme rainfall events. And Eastern Kentucky is in a bad spot to see those elevated rainfall totals. But that doesn't mean, I know Keenan's on here, or the Frankfurt area, some of these more urbanized areas, just like St. Louis. I mean, you get 4 or 5 inches in a short time span, you're going to see devastating flooding too. So it doesn't have to be in those hills and valley locations over there in Eastern Kentucky. So something we need to look at going forward, most definitely.
Yeah, Matt, the St. Louis event was like the day before, and it was also one in 1,000 type event. So we had 2 of those back to back.
Yeah, when you say unprecedented, that it's definitely underlined. So, yep.
All right. Anybody else have anything?
There is one question on the YouTube channel. It is being asked why corn is more impacted by early season drought than soybeans.
Matt, you want to handle that one?
Yeah, it all really corn going into pollination. It ultimately is decided on when you plant the crop. Talking to county agents out in Western Kentucky, some of the early planted corn was hit a little worse than some of the later planted corn. Some counties out there hit the rain, got some very timely rainfall. Others didn't. Soybeans, the most sensitive time for water stress, is a little later in the summer time compared to corn. But once again, it depends whenever you put that crop in the ground. But generally, this round of drought hurt the corn crop more so than beans. Beans tend also to be a little bit more drought resilient, as Chip was talking about. Now, saying that, we go into the middle stages, later stages of June. You have winter wheat being harvested. You have double crop beans going in the ground. I did hear from some producers out in Western Kentucky that some of those double crop were struggling to get out of the ground because moisture was so limited at the time. We have been seeing some decent rainfall recently. I think Chip showed in one of the slides anywhere from a 1/2 inch to 1.5 inches over the past week over that way. So that will help with beans. I did have some producers talking about height. They just haven't got out of the ground very much this year. In that article, I believe, well, it might be a different article. I'll have to share with the group, talking about some of the impacts to the soybean crop this year. I can probably try to find that real quick and link you to that. But yeah, just a little later in the season, where water stress is more impactful for the soybean crop compared to corn. So hope that answers your question. Let me see if I can find that link real quick, and I'll share it on this page.
And Matt, one thing, this is Kevin, one thing on corn, once corn is pollinating, if we've got those high extreme temperatures and drought stress, once we miss that pollination on the ear, then it's not, it can't recover. You'll have aborted grain and that kind of thing. Whereas soybeans, they can lose some flowers and then continue to bloom and set more pods if you start getting some moisture. So, beans can definitely recover. Whereas corn, if you miss that pollination window, you're kind of stuck with what, with a lower yield.
Good point. Good point. I just shared that link in the chat. Well, you're on YouTube. Can you share that on YouTube, Megan?
Sure can. All right. So after this bit of discussion, I think we've all come to realize how incredibly sensitive Kentucky is to all of these extreme events, and it impacts every single bit of our lives and the community's lives and everything. So hopefully at some point we'll get some breathing room with regard to disasters and all of that. But you mentioned, Matt, that there was that preparedness webinar. So hopefully that will help give some good training with regard to how to handle things going forward. So any other questions or comments or discussion to have?
This is Keenan again, just real quick. I think that preparedness training will be a big help to a lot of the agents, because with what's been happening, not like you say, not just in Kentucky, but all over the United States in the past year, we're starting to get a lot of interest from folks. So I appreciate that opportunity.
Thanks, Keenan. I'll be sure to make sure it's recorded.
All right, well, let's go ahead and wrap up. Thank you so much for being here. And as Chip mentioned, next regularly scheduled webinar will be September 1st at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central. And feel free to get in touch with any of us if you have comments or feedback. And don't forget to contribute when you're able to do the Drought and Hydrologic Impact Reporter. This is, again, very crucial, especially in some of these areas that are experiencing drought at this time over in Western Kentucky. The more information we have, the better. So thank you for being here, and we'll look forward to seeing you in September.